A brilliant neurosurgeon. A perfect life. Until one night, he returns home early, and everything shatters. His wife's betrayal is only the beginning. A missing scientist. Stolen research. And now, someone is hunting him. What was once his greatest achievement has become his biggest threat. Can he uncover the truth before it's too late? Dr. Adrian Langley gripped the steering wheel of his sleek electric car as he navigated the serpentine coastal highway, the vast expanse of the Atlantic stretching endlessly to his right. The setting sun painted the waves in hues of amber and crimson, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts raging within him. He had returned home earlier than expected from a prestigious medical conference in Geneva, eager to share groundbreaking findings in neurointerface technology with his wife. The excitement that had accompanied him on the flight back now felt hollow, an inexplicable weight settling in his chest. The vehicle hummed quietly as it rolled into the driveway of his ultramodern home, perched precariously on a cliffside. The architecture was sharp, minimalist, almost clinical, an aesthetic he had once admired but now seemed cold and distant. He cut the engine, stepped out with his overnight bag, and approached the entrance. The illuminated keypad blinked expectantly as he entered the security code. The familiar chime signaled the door's release, allowing him entry into what should have been the sanctuary of his home. A stillness hung in the air, the kind that made his instincts bristle. His voice echoed slightly as he called out, but no reply came. His gaze swept the entryway, and there, by the door, rested an unfamiliar pair of leather dress shoes. The brand was expensive, the style refined, distinctly masculine. A chill settled into his spine, the kind that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze whispering through the open doorway. From the upper level, muffled voices drifted down, a melodic lilt intertwined with a deeper, confident tone. His wife's laugh, unmistakable and carefree, reached his ears, followed by an intimate murmur that did not belong to him. His heartbeat quickened, the trained precision of a surgeon momentarily overridden by an onslaught of raw emotion. Yet he did not charge forward. Instead, something colder, more calculating, overtook him. He ascended the stairs without a sound, his mind already dissecting the situation with the methodical detachment he applied in the operating room. The door to his private study stood ajar. Through the narrow gap, he glimpsed them, his wife, entangled in the arms of another man, her hands threading through his hair as his lips traced a path along her neck. Papers littered the desk, reports from the very research Adrian had been devoted to for years, forgotten in their carelessness. A betrayal beyond the physical, his work, his life's purpose, reduced to collateral damage in their indulgence. Every impulse screamed for confrontation, for explosive retribution. But he held himself back, muscles rigid as he retreated with measured steps. Storming in now would accomplish nothing but theatrics. Instead, he walked away, exiting as silently as he had entered, the roar of his own pulse the only sound accompanying him back to his car. The drive led him to an isolated stretch of beach, where the tide lapped at the shore under a darkening sky. He parked and stepped onto the sand, the cool grains pressing against his soles as he moved closer to the water. The betrayal gnawed at him, but amidst the turmoil, clarity emerged. Anger, grief, disbelief, they all had their place, but they would not dictate his actions. No, he would not allow himself to be ruled by impulse. His intellect, the very thing that had brought him professional success, would be his weapon now. As the night deepened, so did his resolve. This was no longer about broken vows or stolen moments of passion. The presence of confidential documents amidst the betrayal suggested something more insidious. This was not just infidelity, it was deception at multiple levels. Whatever was happening within the walls of his own home extended beyond his marriage. And he needed to uncover the truth before making his move. The following morning, Adrian walked into the sterile corridors of the city's leading medical institution, his expression unreadable. His mind remained disciplined, his focus intact, despite the chaos seething beneath the surface. His hands, the instruments of life and precision, did not falter as he prepared for the high-stakes procedure of the day, a complex neurosurgery that held the fate of a prominent political figure in delicate balance. Through the ritual of scrubbing in, the world outside the operating room ceased to exist. The sterile scent of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the hushed voices of the surgical team, these were his constants, the realm where he reigned supreme. But even within the sanctity of this controlled environment, the weight of discovery lingered. The first incision was made with unwavering precision, his expertise guiding each motion. Yet, deep in his mind, shadows of the previous night whispered, the image of his wife entwined with another superimposed over the delicate structures of the human brain he worked to preserve. A momentary lapse, a fleeting tremor, one that did not go unnoticed. The resident assisting him, a keen observer with a sharp intellect, subtly adjusted her positioning, steadying what should not have needed support. No words were exchanged, no acknowledgement made, but the silent intervention was enough to ground him. He inhaled deeply, his focus sharpening. The surgery proceeded flawlessly, a triumph of skill over distraction. As he emerged from the operating room, exhausted but victorious, the outside world pressed in once more. A familiar voice called his name, and he turned to see a figure he recognized but had never had reason to interact with personally before. Detective Marcus Ellis stood waiting, a look of quiet determination on his face. "I need a moment of your time, Dr. Langley." The words carried weight, a gravity that hinted at complications beyond the personal betrayal Adrian had uncovered. He squared his shoulders, his instincts sharpening once more. Whatever this was, it was only the beginning. Doctor. Adrian Langley sat across from Detective Marcus Ellis in the dimly lit corner of a quiet cafe, the scent of burnt coffee and aged wood lingering in the air. The detective's presence, an unexpected disruption to an already tumultuous day, was a stark reminder that the betrayal he had uncovered the night before was merely the beginning of something far greater. Ellis slid a small notebook onto the table, flipping it open with deliberate ease. "Dr. Langley," he began, his voice carrying the weight of years spent unraveling secrets, "I understand you were close to Dr. Victor Hale, one of the early investors in the Langford Institute. When was the last time you spoke to him?" Adrian's fingers tensed around the ceramic cup before him. "It's been a while." "Why do you ask?" Ellis studied him carefully, his expression giving away nothing. "Hale has been missing for over 3 weeks. The last known correspondence from him suggested he was about to reveal something significant regarding recent advancements at the Institute. Then he vanished." A chill ran down Adrian's spine. Hale had been involved in the foundational work of the Institute's neural interface research. If he had disappeared just as they were approaching a major breakthrough, it couldn't be a coincidence. He exhaled slowly, choosing his words carefully. He was always cautious with his work, never one to take unnecessary risks. "Are you suggesting foul play?" Ellis leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "We don't rule anything out. What I do know is that he had concerns about proprietary data being compromised. He reached out to a few colleagues before disappearing, warning them about breaches in security." Adrian's mind reeled. The documents scattered across his desk the night before, the ease with which they had been dismissed in the heat of betrayal, could they have been stolen? Was his wife merely a pawn in something far more sinister? He had initially framed the deception in personal terms, but now, a different reality was emerging. The detective continued. "Dr. Hale had a secure server where he stored sensitive information. We haven't been able to access it yet, but if there's any chance you know how to reach it, it could be critical in determining what happened to him." Adrian's gaze dropped to the tabletop. He and Hale had worked closely in the past, sharing encrypted channels for communication. If something had happened to Hale, it was possible that remnants of his findings remained in those digital corridors. "I'll see what I can find," Adrian said finally, his voice even. "If there's any data left, I'll find a way to retrieve it." Ellis nodded, standing to leave. "Be careful, Dr. Langley. If what Hale discovered was enough to make him disappear, you might be next." As Adrian watched the detective walk away, a heavy sense of unease settled over him. The pieces of his life were shifting rapidly, and each revelation only deepened the chasm beneath him. He had been preoccupied with his wife's betrayal, but now, a darker question loomed: had he been blind to something far more dangerous? That evening, Adrian returned to his home with a renewed sense of urgency. He bypassed the main living space and entered his private office, securing the door behind him. With careful precision, he accessed the encrypted system he and Hale had once shared. The familiar interface greeted him, a stark reminder of the secrets buried within their work. Lines of code scrolled across the screen as he searched for any sign of Hale's last transmissions. Hours passed before he finally found what he was looking for, a fragmented message, hastily uploaded before the signal was lost. Data breach confirmed. They know. Prototype compromised. Do not trust anyone within the Institute. Monitor the anomaly in test subject 142. This changes everything. Adrian's pulse quickened. The message was vague but damning. The breach wasn't just theoretical, it had already happened. And more importantly, someone had been watching their test subjects closely, perhaps manipulating outcomes. He didn't need further confirmation that his wife and her accomplice were involved. They hadn't just betrayed him, they had betrayed the very principles that had guided his work. A noise from the hallway pulled him from his thoughts. The creak of a floorboard, light, cautious. He wasn't alone. Shutting the terminal, Adrian reached for the drawer where he kept a steel letter opener, a crude but effective precaution. He moved swiftly to the door, listening for any further movement. The silence pressed against his eardrums, heavy and oppressive. Then, a shadow moved beneath the gap in the doorway. Adrian inhaled sharply, every nerve on high alert. He had spent his life mastering the delicate balance of human fragility and resilience. Now, it seemed, he would have to apply that knowledge in ways he had never anticipated. The storm had only just begun. Dr. Adrian Langley barely had time to process the weight of the message he had uncovered before the soft creak of a floorboard outside his office brought him back to reality. Someone was there. His pulse quickened, but his hands remained steady as he reached for the steel letter opener in his drawer. He moved silently toward the door, pressing his ear against the cool wood. The shadow remained motionless for a brief moment before disappearing down the hallway. Adrian's mind raced. Had they seen what he had found? Were they after him, or was this merely an attempt to intimidate? He wasn't about to wait to find out. Moving swiftly but without panic, he shut down his terminal, ensuring any remaining traces of his activity were erased. He had to get out, but first, he needed to know who was behind this. He glanced at the security feed displayed on his tablet, but the footage had been cut just minutes before. Someone had planned this. Descending the back staircase, he slipped into the shadows of the kitchen and out through the side entrance. The crisp night air filled his lungs as he quickly made his way to his car. Just as he reached the vehicle, headlights flicked on at the end of the long driveway. A sleek black SUV idled there, its presence an unmistakable warning. He had two options, confrontation or escape. Knowing he lacked the necessary firepower for the former, he chose the latter. He slid into the driver's seat, his car roaring to life as he threw it into gear. The SUV responded immediately, pulling onto the road behind him as he sped toward the city. His mind raced through potential safe havens. There was only one person he could trust, Detective Marcus Ellis. Adrian punched in his number, barely waiting for an answer. "I need to meet." "Now." Ellis hesitated. "Langley, it's late. What's going on?" "Someone's following me. I found something about Hale, something big." The detective sighed, but there was an edge of alertness in his voice now. "Meet me at the old pier. You've got 10 minutes. Adrian hung up and pushed the car harder, weaving through the nearly deserted streets. He knew this was dangerous, but he had no choice. If Hale had been silenced, he could be next. The pier was desolate, the wooden planks creaking underfoot as Adrian exited the car. Ellis was already there, his stance cautious, eyes scanning their surroundings. "Talk," the detective said. Adrian handed him the tablet, watching as Ellis scrolled through the fragmented messages. His face darkened. "This confirms it. Hale was onto something, and it got him killed." Adrian exhaled, the weight of it all pressing down on him. And now they know I'm digging. Ellis pocketed the device. Then we don't have much time. We need to move first. A sudden noise from the distance made them both freeze. The SUV had found them. Run. Adrian barely had time to react before the SUV's doors swung open. Silhouettes stepped out, moving with calculated precision. The night air thickened with the unspoken threat of violence. Ellis grabbed Adrian's arm, yanking him into motion before the first voice called out. Dr. Langley, there's no need to run. Adrian didn't stop to listen. His instincts, honed through years of high-stakes surgery, dictated his next steps, calm, measured, yet swift. The pier offered limited options, but an old service ladder leading to the understructure caught his eye. He sprinted toward it, Ellis close behind. Bullets shattered the silence, striking wood and metal as they clambered down. Salt air burned Adrian's lungs, but he pressed forward, his grip tightening on the rusted rungs. The labyrinthine support beams beneath the pier offered cover, but not for long. Keep moving, Ellis ordered, drawing his weapon. They wove through the maze of wooden supports, the thundering footsteps above reminding Adrian of the urgency. The detective moved with the grace of someone accustomed to being hunted, guiding them through the shadows toward the far end of the beach. When they finally emerged, the city skyline loomed ahead, lights flickering like distant signals of salvation. A nondescript sedan sat parked along the back road leading away from the shore. Ellis gestured toward it. Get in. Adrian hesitated for a fraction of a second, his gaze flicking back to the pier. The men were still searching, their voices carrying in the wind. He slid into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut as Ellis turned the ignition. The car roared to life, tires kicking up gravel as they sped away. Only when they were several miles away did Adrian speak. They knew where I'd be. Ellis's grip tightened on the wheel. Which means we've got a leak. Adrian's thoughts drifted back to his research, to the stolen data, to the implications of what Hale had uncovered. The weight of it all settled on his chest like a vice. Ellis turned onto a dimly lit road, bringing the car to a slow stop. We need to lay low until we figure out our next move. Adrian looked out into the darkness, knowing that this was far from over. The chase was just beginning. The hours that followed felt suspended in an eerie quiet, the hum of the sedan's engine the only sound filling the space between Adrian and Ellis. The city lights grew distant, replaced by the darkened outline of an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of town. Ellis pulled into a concealed alleyway, killing the headlights before shutting off the engine. Adrian exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. We need to get ahead of this. Staying on the defensive will only buy us time. Ellis nodded, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. I know someone who can help. Someone who deals in information, the kind that doesn't make it into official reports. The detective reached for his phone, scrolling through encrypted contacts before settling on a name. The call was brief, a whispered exchange of details and a location sent through a secure line. Within moments, they were back on the road, heading toward a meeting that could shift the balance of their fight. The rendezvous point was an old train depot, long abandoned but still standing as a forgotten relic of another era. Ellis and Adrian stepped out, their breath visible in the cold night air. A single figure waited near a rusted cargo container, hood drawn low, a cigarette burning between gloved fingers. You're late, the voice murmured, distorted by the night's stillness. Ellis crossed his arms. You're lucky we showed at all. The informant chuckled, taking a long drag before exhaling. Word travels fast. Your little escape at the pier didn't go unnoticed. The cigarette flicked to the ground, embers dying against the gravel. You need leverage. I can give it to you. Adrian stepped forward, his voice steady. What do you know about the breach? About Hale's disappearance? The informant pulled a flash drive from his coat pocket, turning it between his fingers. Everything you need to take them down is right here. But it comes with a price. Ellis tensed. We don't have time for games. A smirk played on the informant's lips. Then you'd better act fast. Because you're running out of options. Adrian hesitated only for a moment before reaching for the drive. As soon as his fingers closed around it, a distant sound shattered the fragile stillness, the low growl of approaching engines. Headlights flared in the distance, slicing through the night like a blade. "They found you," the informant muttered before slipping back into the shadows. "Good luck." Ellis grabbed Adrian's arm. "We move." Now. The chase was far from over. It had only just begun.